For early access plus exclusive content, facilitated discussions, live one-on-one Q&As, and more, become a patron at patreon.com/BrucePoinsett.
What was important to me is that the conversations around people of color also be one in which children understand that there's not just one type of story that's told. And part of this is what the publishing industry is having to start to learn and turn around, right? That, it's not every time, not all stories took place in the 60s around the civil rights struggle. Like, not all of Black history is around trauma. Because that's typically what you'll see. Those are the books that can break through, that the public, once a writer is known for something, if they can write that second one again and it will get that same return, maybe that will be. But I think it's starting to push open a lot more. And you're seeing a wider range of representations and a wider range of narratives. And because it's the same, I've seen the same thing with Asian stories. It's a lot on the stories of the immigration process or the trauma. And without any question, we don't not share those stories. That's not as though those are off the table, nor is it to say those stories are not important. But in like the white community around whiteness, you'll see a much broader range of stories. So there'll be things, so of course there's stories around trauma and hardship. But there's also stories around just that fun summer that we had and what it meant to be a youth. And there's also things around kids who are being imaginative and creative. And I think there are certain publications that do this very, very well. Like I can think of one called Ladybug, which I only started seeing it in 2000, but I'm pretty impressed by the way the representation they would have in that magazine from early on. But I think the publishing industry and books are really becoming better about putting out more stories. And I think Black Lives Matter has really been a big instrument to that. Because I think the larger conversation in the community is that there isn't this monolith, right? We're not a monolith. And part of dismantling the constructs is understanding that we all get to have a different way that we live. We all get to be who we feel we are. Because part of literacy, and what's important around literacy to me too, is identity. Like you being able to absorb and learn your identity through these different mediums and deciding who you want to be, rather than some external construct being formed and putting you in a box. And I think what the selections that I've tried my best to find, and it's fun exploring them because there's a lot out there, but you have to also find, I try to make them around certain themes. But we've had things on astronauts, we've had things on cowboys, people of color who what else have we done? It's all escaping me. Can't remember some of the other ones. I've avoided right now things around entertainment because I think we get a lot, like that's where a lot of people are put, and the history behind that is very interesting. But just, science, we've done things around STEM, of course. So for me, finding new types of stories that haven't been told around people who aren't often seen is really interesting, and it's less done. There's very popular books that you'll see come into the classrooms over and over again, and I certainly don't avoid those, but trying to find like stories and themes that might not come into the classroom is interesting to me. Like my next one, what I'm trying to find right now are things on pirates, like they're Black pirates. I did one on bird watching. That one was, of course, inspired by our Central Park incident. So I did a whole story thing around birding and found a great book put out on birders of color. This young girl who's a person of color, who another person of color introduces her to the world of bird watching. And so we had things around that. So sometimes it's inspired by the narratives and conversations that are happening, and then that will inform like what will come up. Finding people and places and ideas that people don't associate people of color with, right? Like things they don't typically associate them with. And or just things that I think are beautiful, like a book that's beautiful or a storyline that's beautiful, and then centering things around that. I think we're trying to make it weekly now, which will change the prep time is going to have to be a lot faster. But I do feel it's really important that children of color and white children, all children, see children of color in many different ways, and not always hurt or burdened or being pushed down, because you don't want the internalized message to be that there's a particular place and for children of color, and this is where it always is. I think we have to break free of this notion that there's only one story.